Special thanks to Batahan A for providing us with today's MSM Draw. Submit a drawing prompt with the hashtag MSM Draw in this video for a chance for it to be drawn in the next one. Okay, so it turns out the Bisonorus is some people's favorite, so my apologies for the title and thumbnail, but not really. I will admit the Bisonorus has really grown on me while I researched it. It turns out that I really like the Cave Island track, but I digress. It's with a heavy heart that I inform you that this is the last installment of our Monster Biology exclusive month. We'll be back with more episodes, but we're resuming our normal schedule of What's in a Name, Monster Biology, and then a video of my choosing. So we'll have a brief interlude with What's in a Name next week, but we'll be back in the lab with another Monster Biology in the following week. So for now, sit back and enjoy how this wonderful season of Monster Biology, Biogust, Biotember ends, not with a bang, but with a dum diddly dum. Final monster of this month of Monster Biology. Let's make it a good one. Oh, yeah. Hey, we are not doing that today. We're spinning the wheel fair and square. Alright, we just cross our fingers and hope for the best. Alright. I'll accept that, that's fine. We can start off this episode by dispelling a theory I saw numerous times in the comments section of the Monster Biology teaser post. It appears unclear whether or not the Bisonorus is a single conjoined monster or two separate entities. While we don't see any evidence of either theory in both MSM and Dawn of Fire, we do have multiple posts by the My Singing Monsters channel itself showing that the Bisonorus is indeed two independent organisms in a mutual relationship with each other. We can see that the egg sprite of this monster consists of two eggs rather than the standard one. This further implies that the Emperor and standard Bisonorus hatched separately out of their own eggs. I won't outright say that this episode is simple, but the Bisonorus clearly has less features to note than the Crunchy in our last episode. Nevertheless, I'm excited to walk you through the interesting anatomical features of this fire quad, and our star feature is quite entertaining and food for thought. You know, now that I've mentioned it, let me tell you about an interesting trend I have found in Monster Biology. In each episode, there's always been some sort of anatomical feature of the monster that I take a lot of time to explain, because I view it as like the coolest or the trickiest or the most interesting topic of the monster to explain. In my thumbnails, I sometimes allude to that feature, like the speakers of the Crunchy, the somnium of the Cherubble, the electric capabilities of the Astropod, and the crystalline sound-amplifying biology of the Stog. I want to use this opportunity to give this term an official name. You've heard of a creature feature, but in this case, I believe it would be called the feature feature. The part of the monster I consider to be the most advertisable. That being said, I'm really excited about the Bisonorus' feature because it pulls from a really unique example in the real world. So let's dive right in. We begin by focusing on the face of the standard Bisonorus. Aside from the vast real estate that is this monster's cranium, we pick out the presence of eyes and a mouth. Additionally, we see that it has, hold on to your hats, a nose. Now, if we were to follow the sage advice of the Parlsona, Wordo of the legendary monster class, available on Plants and Air Island, stating that, quote, every monster knows, end quote, we realize that monster schnozzes are few and far between. Out of all monsters, only 83 of 363 have noses, making the nose-having population only 23%. Not exactly how I expected to spend my afternoon, but it's worth the numbers. Putting this information aside, because it will literally never help us again, we can take a look at the nose of the Bisonorus. Well, it's flat and gray. It's sort of rectangular and kind of looks like the nose of a koala. There's nothing to learn that we don't know, right? I mean, no, right? Well, let me draw your attention to this special little guy right here.
It's just a line.
I know it's just a line, but it's a special line. This is called a philtrum. On humans, it's a little divot of skin that you can use to balance a pencil on. But on animals like dogs, it's a crevice that divides the nose up the middle, like what we see on the Bisonorus. This is my dog Kiko here to give us a close-up on dog nose anatomy. When Kiko licks her nose, the moisture collects into her philtrum and keeps her nose wet. Smells and airborne scents are more easily absorbed into the nose when it is moist. Kiko can most effectively smell and eat my food when her nose is wet, all thanks to the philtrum. In the case of the Bisonorus, we could posit that the standard variant has a heightened sense of smell due to the presence of the philtrum. It could be used to find food, or perhaps track down the Emperor in the event it becomes separated from the standard Bisonorus. Now that we've talked about the Bisonorus's nose for way longer than we had to, I'd like to move on to talking about the bones. The Emperor Bisonorus has mammalian features like fur, while the standard is reptilian, sporting scales and a plated underbelly. Due to the reptilian characteristics, I had a judgment call to make regarding the ribcage of this monster. Mammalian ribcages sort of loop around from the spine and connect up to the sternum. Below the main event of bone spaghetti are a couple of ribs connected to the spine, but do not wrap around to connect in the front. These are called vertebral, or floating ribs, because they sort of just vibe in the middle of the flesh, only connected on one end. However, for many reptilian rib cages, the sternum is absent, and all of the ribs are vertebral ribs. This means that a dinosaur is built like an upside-down taco, crunchy on all the sides with the good stuff in the middle. This makes the belly a weak point of the animal because all of the organs are behind the skin. This also makes reptiles optimal for belly rubs, if you can get past the teeth and the thick scales of the stomach. I do not condone giving lizards belly rubs. Please contact your local animal control and common sense before approaching a reptile with the intent to touch it in its most vulnerable location. That being said, we can apply the knowledge to the standard Bisonorus. It has a few vertebral ribs that provide support for the absolute dumpling that this monster is. But aside from that, there's not much skeletal support going on inside it. Instead, their thick belly plates and thicker fat deposits keep the vitals protected. Lizards have the taco ribcage design because they have 4 legs, and their ribs are always meant to be facing downwards, the belly parallel to the ground. The Bisonorus is sitting upright, but its skeletal structure and influences imply that when it's on the move, it walks on all 4s. Speaking of limbs, we can now take a look at the arms and legs of the standard Bisonorus. If we look closely at the elbows, knees, and the heel of the foot, we can see a distinct spiral pattern indented into the skin. These markings are genetic in origin. Spirals are one of the most common naturally occurring shapes in the world. They're found in shells, flowers, galaxies, plants, and much more. Just like we have hundreds of little loops and spirals making up our fingerprints, the Bisonorus has spirals form on its joints and feet. Additionally, DNA is structurally a double helix, which is a spiral shape. You might have just noticed that the painting jumped ahead a little bit. I paused the time lapse to do something, and then I forgot to turn it back on. The markings on the limbs could unintentionally reference the incredible potential for genetic adaptation this monster possesses. What potential for adaptation, you may ask? Well, say hello to today's feature. If we were to look at the physical biology of the standard Bisonorus versus the Emperor Bisonorus, we can see that the array of anatomical features differs quite dramatically. The Emperor lacks a nose, has 1 less eye, and different horns. More noticeably are its orange fur instead of purple scales, its diminutive size, and its long furry tail. Also, the Emperor Bisonorus doesn't possess hind legs, which I mistakenly included in my artwork until the final rendition. That certainly came as a shock to me when I reviewed Bisonorus pictures on the internet. These 2 monsters, as stated by the bio, are the same species, as in their genetic makeup is the same. There's something that's causing the DNA of the Bisonorus to change while it is still an embryo. To further explain that, we need to talk about genes. First invented in 1873 by Levi Strauss, this denim material was dyed blue to hide dirt stains. You see, the intended wearers of blue jeans were laborers and miners, so the durability and flexibility of denim allowed them to work efficiently without being restricted in movement. No, actually, we're talking about the genes found in cells. Simply put, genes are special patterns in your DNA, which are composed of organic molecules and contains the physical blueprints of how an organism looks. Genes, when activated by the cells in your body, produce protein, a different type for each type of gene. Depending on which gene is activated, different proteins are produced all throughout your life and affect the way you look. For example, you have genes that produce the pigment in your eyes. If the brown eye gene isn't active when you're a baby, then the blue eye gene kicks in instead. Both genes are present, but just a few are active at a time to give you a particular characteristic. In the case of the Bisonorus, there appears to be dormant genes in the DNA of the monster. It contains the potential to grow into either a standard or an emperor Bisonorus, given the right conditions. This means, in any subspecies of Bisonorus, there are genes that dictate the number of eyes, fur color, size, skin type, and body plan. The opposing genes are active in each type of monster. The next logical question is to ask, what conditions cause the Bisonorus to grow into an emperor? When we look at both body plans, we notice something peculiar. The emperor seems entirely unfit for survival in the wild. With one eye messing with depth perception, no nose to track down scents, and no back legs to move quickly, it seems that the Emperor's motor functions pale in comparison to the much more capable and muscly standard Bisonorus. That is, because they do. There's no way for the Emperor Bisonorus to survive without the help of his larger companion. Both the survival capabilities and the monster's moniker of standard imply that the big purple monster is the normal outcome for a developing Bisonorus embryo. And thus, we return to the question of what makes a healthy Bisonorus baby develop instead into an emperor. Let's turn to the real-world science of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the interaction between the genetic factors of the organism and its surrounding environment. A great example of this is found in worker bees and queen bees, which operate on a very similar system as the Bisonorus. When bee larvae are being cared for by the older workers, they are fed all the nutrients they could need to become hard-working members of the hive. Some of this nutrients include a slime secreted from worker bee faces, called royal jelly. It's rich in carbohydrates, proteins, and other vitamins. Eventually, larvae are no longer given the jelly, but instead rations of honey and pollen. However, certain female larvae, chosen as heirs to the queen bee's throne, continue to eat royal jelly all throughout their larval stage, as well as filling their little rooms in the honeycomb with it. Imagine if you spent the first 18 years of your life living in a sleeping bag, and the sleeping bag was full to the top with your favorite condiment, like ketchup or mayonnaise or cream cheese, or in my case, peanut butter. This lifestyle guarantees that the bee larva is constantly absorbing the nutrients needed to become a queen. The excess of royal jelly activates the dormant queen genes in the bee's DNA, and it makes the insect grow much larger, have smaller wings, and develop active reproductive organs. In the case of the Bisonorus, there is always one emperor for every standard Bisonorus. It stands to reason that because both Bisonori are born at the same time, they can be considered twins. Most likely fraternal twins, which means that although they were born at the same time, they have different genetic code and are not identical. The egg of the emperor probably has a special material not unlike royal jelly filling it. This means that as the Bisonorus twins develop in their eggs, both identical embryos slowly develop into completely different organisms due to the interior of the eggs being full of a different substance. As a quick finisher of a side thought, note that the emperor is just as common as a standard Bisonorus, meaning that this sort of sibling dynamic is genetically encoded to happen. Bisonori are always born as twins of different forms, making the title of emperor not in fact royalty, nor rarity. Instead, it represents the mental capacity of the orange monster and introduces us to our final point. The relationship between the Bisonori is called mutualism, meaning that they both benefit from hanging out with each other. It's fairly obvious that the emperor benefits from the standard because it provides transportation, muscle, and capabilities that the emperor does not have, like the ability to sniff out food. However, sources have shown that the standard benefits from the relationship by having a mentor of sorts. The monster handlers have confirmed that the standard Bisonorus is very chatty and asks a lot of questions, bringing to mind the antics of children. To me, this makes it seem like the standard is a bit scatterbrained, especially compared against the demeanor of the emperor, which has been confirmed to be very curt and to the point, invoking a sense of logic and seriousness. Other hints in the bio, like how the Emperor is able to get away with cheating in rock, paper, scissors of all games, and how it tells the Standard what to do, and how the Standard is described as eager to please, imply that the Standard Bisonorus is a few bamboo short of a mushroom umbrella. That is, it's not very gifted in the Department of Intelligence. This means that while the Standard keeps the Emperor pampered, the Emperor looks out for the Standard and lets it live its best life. The Bisonorus' dependency on each other is a literal example of brains over brawn, which might be the entire purpose of this monster's pairing. So that sums up my thoughts on the Bisonorus. Let's see the final notes. The rare Bisonorus isn't too different from its common counterpart. It seems that the Standard grew a tail, which as we know is a collection of genes not expressed in that particular subspecies of Bisonorus. It could be a misfired set of genes that give it the tail of the Emperor, which I think is a really cool concept for the rare. Additionally, the Standard has small horns built into the skin around the eyes, just like many species of horned frog. Just like the frog though, these horns are merely extensions of the flesh and are not composed of bone. However, where the horns usually grow, there are brightly colored furthers. These could serve as a signal for potential mates, or as an intimidation tactic if anyone gets too close for comfort. One interesting thing to note is that the nose lacks a philtrum and is dried out and cracked. It could be that, because there's no way for the nose to contain hydrating saliva, it dried out and the skin cracked. The Standard might want to get some ointment. Now on to the epic idea. Instead of having a super flashy and complicated epic, I think it would be funny to have the growth genes switched in the Standard and the Emperor. It still fits the theme of a major sprite change, but also capitalizes on the dynamics between the two monster designs. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this climactic episode of the month of monster biology. I look forward to seeing you in the next video on the channel. I'd once again like to push for 100,000 subscribers by Christmas this year, because a special surprise awaits us if we do. But that's it for now. You have been watching Creeptanium, and I will see you all later.